Hi, this is Chantal Gray. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Greek architecture today. And this is a depiction of the Acropolis in Athens. A few things to remember about Greek society, which informs the architecture at this time, is that Greek culture was very communal. The uh, the the society was everything was very public, and temples were found throughout Athens and throughout Greece. Temples to different gods, different goddesses. So for Athens, the primary temple is to Athena because she's the patron goddess of Athens. But there would be small temples throughout town to the other gods and goddesses as well. The Greeks gave us geometry. They were very interested in perfection and mathematical understanding of reality. And that definition of keeping things ordered, excuse me, ordered and regulated and neat and tidy and in the boxes. And so they even defined the box itself. They decided that the golden rectangle was, I believe it's twice as long as it is wide. That is the most aesthetically pleasing. A lot of the aesthetics that we have today and a lot of our architecture today comes to us from the Greeks. And they were really quite influential on our lives. This is an artistic depiction of Athens. Let's see here. This is the Acropolis in Athens. And again, I'm taking a lot of my examples from Athens. Much of the architecture throughout Greece was along these same lines. It just most of the research readily available is in Athens, and Athens is an area that we still very much identify with. This is the Acropolis, which is the hill itself, this main hill in Athens. Up here we have the Parthenon, which you can see is at the top of the hill. It is the temple to Athena, and we're going to talk about the Parthenon quite a bit. We have other temple buildings and governmental buildings, places for government to convene, the bank, etc. is up in there. Lovely hillsides. Then we have a couple of theaters, and I believe David spoke about theater quite a bit already. The theaters were built into the hillsides. They were also engineered so that the acoustics worked very well. I apologize. I don't know why this pops up. So ignore that. Thank you. So they were into trying to figure out how to make things as perfect as possible. Here's an example of a theater as it is today. I apologize for the watermarks. I pulled this one off the internet and it came with the watermarks. This is an example of the theater with the orchestra down below. You can see the archways and the open space around the theater. One of the things that we get from the Greeks is they did a lot of things with the columns, and they developed orders that we see especially through the columns and the capitals. That's the top part of the columns. But it's also prevalent throughout the architecture. But it's most easily seen in the columns. So you can see up at the up at the top, there's a Doric style column, which is fairly simple, not too ornate. The Doric column usually flares slightly at the bottom and doesn't have a base. It just meets the floor. The Ionic column has this sort of scroll-like feature at the top, known as a volute. Excuse me again. And the fluting, the vertical stripes are much narrower in the Ionic capital, or Ionic column. And then the Corinthian capital is much more ornate. It gives the idea that there is a basket at the top with leaves. These are acanthus leaves. The acanthus plant is very popular in Greece. It grows everywhere. It's got these large, beautiful leaves. And so they decorated the columns with these leaves, or sculpted interpretations of the leaves with the vine work, and then the volutes, the scroll work that's sort of reminiscent of what we have happening with the Ionic style. You can see here that we have columns that are usually on a set of steps called a stylobase. The columns go up. We often see this sort of frieze in the middle here, often with like these nice little triglyphs here. Often we have bas-relief sculpture in the metopies here. And then the pediment here is this triangle portion. Originally, early on, the pediment was actually a stretched leather. And that's what created that facade. And that leather would make a sound when the wind blew. It was like a drum. And in fact, that's where we get timpani from. And the term tympanum, from your ear, comes from the tympanum, from the timpani. So this center section here is the tympanum, that portion of the pediment. Later, we get very ornate sculpture happening in the tympanum area here. And often we have sculptures at the top of these pediments. And one of the reasons, I'm not expecting you to know all the terms of these things, but you'll see that this architecture comes up again and again and again. If you look at, houses around town, they often have this same sort of triangular front. Banks, government buildings, all sorts of things. We keep going back to that style. Here's an example of a temple in Greece. It's in the Ionic style. Again, you can see the columns, the steps going up, the altar house in the back there. We have a frieze at the top, and then our pediment is gone in this one. Here's another example. I believe this one's in the British Museum. It is they took pieces from a temple and they reassembled it at the museum. An Ionic temple. Again, you can see the frieze, the bas-relief sculpture in the tympanum inside of this pediment here. Sculptures down below, and this temple facade. Here's a picture of the Acropolis from a distance. One of the things that is really kind of a neat marvel about the Acropolis is that because it is seen from a distance most often, and it is seen from a lower angle, the Greeks realized that from that angle, it created an illusion that the columns were not straight, and that the columns, again, being viewed from a distance, if they were straight columns, they would look like they curve inward. And so what they decided to do is they took those columns and they made them swell out just a little bit. So they're slightly fatter in the middle than they are at the top and the bottom. This does two things. One, it makes the columns look straight, and also it sort of reflects the human body in that like when a muscle is under tension, like if you're poised and ready to jump, or if you're pushing something, your muscle tends to have a slight swelling to it because it's under tension. And they wanted to echo that in the columns. But this is what the Acropolis looks like today, with the Parthenon up at the top. Here's an artistic depiction of what it might look like. Again, you can see many sculptures, and the lovely Parthenon at the top. It was the pride of Athens. Here's a picture of part of the Parthenon. They're in the process of trying to reconstruct it. One of the challenges is that you can see that the columns were built through a series of drums that were stacked one upon the other, and this fluting goes through. Many of the columns have fallen down and are sort of mixed together. And so the people trying to do the reconstruction thought, okay, you grab the big one and then the smaller one and the smaller one. They discovered that each and every one of these columns is unique. There are slight variances to the columns, so that, again, they look perfect from a distance, but there are slight differences in every column. And in fact, the floor has a slight bow to it, again, so it looks straight and nice and tidy from a distance. Here's a depiction of what it would have looked like when it was built. It's got this central room, which is the altar to Athena, which would have a sculpture of Athena inside, and you can go in and worship her, with an open peristyle, this porch that goes all the way around so that you can walk around the whole building. Again, many sculptures here. We think of it as being very white. In reality, we realize that it's white simply because the paint has all worn off. They would have been very brightly, ornately painted. This is what we believe the statue to Athena looked like, based on descriptions, based on some pieces that we have that reflect what it would have looked like. You can see here that she is huge. There's a person down here in the corner, to kind of give you a sense of scale and perspective. And in Tennessee, they have done a full reconstruction of the Parthenon. It is at ground level, it's not elevated. We don't quite have that effect, but in it they have reproduced what we believe Athena would have looked like. Again, she's very, very brightly colored, lots of gold, almost technicolor in nature. This is one of the interesting temples that we find in Athens. It's one of the only ones that that we've found that have humans in place of the columns. So these are called caryatids, and they're women, and this is at the Erechtheion. It's just one of the porches of the Erechtheion. The other columns in this building are standard. I believe they're Ionic in this one. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting piece. And we have some examples of these. The Brits, during one of their invasions, stole one of these and put the statue in the museum, which in some ways we should be sad because they stole it, but on the other, it preserved that statue so we can see it. These statues are eroding away because of the acid rain that is prevalent in Greece. And I think that's it for our architecture section. I have another set of slides for art, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But that should give you a pretty good view of what's happening. And Let's see here. Okay.